Today we're going to be creating an add-on using the Hacker add-on from blendersensei.com. There's a lot of really good information here, especially if you're new to Python, new to coding in Blender. Once you have Hacker installed, you just come to the Hacker workspace and you click this button, which opens up this widget thing called the Navigator. All right, so to add a new add-on, we just come to where the plus sign is, click it, and this box pops up here. All right, so we need to come up with a name for our add-on. Let's just call this Modeler Pro. When entering a name here, you want to put in a name that's like the human readable version, like the way you would want the name of your add-on to appear in a website article or something like that. So no underscores, don't make everything all caps or whatever. And then here we need to pick a template. And there are two base templates starting off, the basic and advanced one. Of course, you can make your own templates really easily. We'll get into that in another video. But for now, we're just going to use the basic template here and press OK. All right, as soon as we do that, the add-on is created for us. So what this does is it creates a folder or a directory with the add-on name as well as an init file and places it in the proper location for add-ons to be readable by Blender. So if I click Edit, Preferences, and Add-ons, notice right here that this add-on is already installed and ready to go. It's not activated. We have to check it if we want to activate it, but it's installed. So we can also check it out here. We can see it's been added. There it is. And here are its contents, which is just a single init file. All right, so upon quick inspection, we can see that our title has been entered as the name of the add-on. But if we scroll down, we can see that it's also been used to brand our class names. It's in BLID names, and it's formatted in different ways that fit the various conventions for these things, such as all lowercase underscore for BLID names, all uppercase, and no spaces at all for the beginnings of class names. And as we scroll down, we can see it's everywhere it makes sense to be formatted to brand and also functionally make your add-on work right out of the box. So we're going to go down and inspect each segment of this code. We're not going to get too deep in it because this isn't like a full learn Python from scratch video, but we'll get a little bit in it. The cool thing about both of these add-on templates is that immediately after you create them, you can just press run script and they will work and you can begin doing stuff or testing stuff. After I press run script, if we come over here and click open the UI shelf, we'll see we've got a new tab here called Modeler Pro. And here is our very simple basic add-on. So this is just a real simple little add-on thing. If we press this button, this creates a smooth torus. We get a little message up here, you made a smooth torus. And if we press this, we get a smooth sphere. So this is clearly the pinnacle of all add-ons. And then we have a menu that simply displays the same two buttons, but in menu form. And also right out of the gate, we have a hotkey that we can use, which is Control-Shift-Q, and this brings up the same menu. So these are all just very basic things to get the examples and ideas across. So before we move any forward, let's go ahead and actually activate the add-on and Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and here it is. Let's just go ahead and click it. It's now been activated, and you'll notice that when I do that, you'll see this little label, Add-on Preferences, saves in defaults, gets added with this little property. And so this is just an example of how you can include property from your add-on preferences into regular UI. All right, let's quickly run through what all this code does. So starting out, we have a BLinfo dictionary. Whenever you run into these curly brackets within Python, that is a dictionary, curly brackets with stuff in it, separated by colons and commas. So in a dictionary, you have the dictionary's key on its left and then its value on its right. So key basically just means variable name, and then the value just means what is in the variable. So we have name, and what's inside of it is Modeler Pro. We have author, what's inside of it is nothing, just a string. So we've got version 1.0, and then here, even though we're using a much later version of Blender than 2.80, the reason why this just says 2.80 by default is that a piece of code was put in Blender, the program, to make sure that whenever someone tried to activate an add-on, it had at least been updated to 2.80. So if it says anything below that or there's no version number, the add-on won't run. So this is just a pragmatic thing. It's just in there to make sure that the add-on will actually run, but Blender doesn't check past that. It's not saying, hey, I'm Blender version 2.93 and I won't run unless I say 2.93. It's just interested in, is it at least 2.80? So you can change that if you want, but it's really just there for pragmatic reasons. Okay, so moving down here, we have import BPY, and of course, import is a Python command where it imports modules. And what is a module? Well, it's really just a folder, a directory, usually with an init file like this, underscore init underscore in it. Usually it will have a lot of other files in it that do stuff. So BPY stands for Blender Python, and basically this module, as we discussed, which all add-ons are just modules, but there's special modules for Blender. The BPY module is the way that Blender, which is its core stuff, it's stuff that's where it's talking to your GPU and all your hardcore computer stuff, is written in C. And then its veneer, its user interface, and the way that things are organized within that user interface is mostly written in Python. And this is actually, if you want to see these scripts, all through here are the things that are veneer, surface level Python stuff that Blender runs at startup, like its BLUI module, which is like full of all these different things which compose the arrangement of property panels and menus and buttons and all that kind of stuff. So if you're ever interested in seeing like what are all the things I can import, you can just type IM and then port will show up, tap enter here in the text editor via the IntelliSense powered autofill from Hacker. So this is like all of the modules that come packaged in Python that Blender uses, as well as Blender's own modules and everything in its files. So for instance, a second ago, we were looking at the folder of BLUI stuff. So if I were to type in BL, we can see a lot of all the different things that were actually inside those folders. So literally these like BL underscore operators is coming from that BL operators module, that folder that I just showed you a second ago, or the BLUI, and then you can import stuff. Yeah, so just so you're aware of that. All right, so moving down the line here, we have this section which is dedicated to the add-on preferences update functions. These are special functions which are dedicated to running code if we change some property that we have set up in our add-on user preferences. So just below this, we have the preferences. So this class right here is why there is a menu with a single option here in our add-on preferences where we can do things. What this is just a basic Python class. It's a nobody, everyday Joe Python class. And what makes it be able to do what it's doing is what it's subclassing, is the class that we've put inside of it, which is bpy.types.addonPreferences. So basically, this is just a skin. What it actually is, what its core of what it is this, which allows it to use special functions and properties and things that are part of this. And so it lets it use functions like this draw function, which is coming from this. So we've got just one property for our add-on right now, which its name is my bool property. And let's see, you can see that here. We could change this to something else. We'll just change it to something else. And then we could right-click, run script. And notice that it changes here because we also have this property set up to display in our user layout, which is another class defined a little bit lower in the script. But if we were to check it in the preferences, we can also see that it's changed there as well. We could copy this and add more, Control C, add another one. And another thing, we call this another thing, and maybe rename it. Well, we would have to rename it or it wouldn't be accessible. Another thing, and we could change it from a bool property to, say, a string property. IntelliSense autofill being very useful here, telling us about attributes and things we can do with properties. And then if we wanted this to also show up in our preferences, we could, I'll just double click this. Is a real fast way to select segments of lines. Double click, Control C, and I'll paste it here. I should have copied this first. So Control C to copy this, which causes the bool property to display in our preferences. And now we would have two different preferences. Just right click, run script, which does the same thing as pressing this. And looks like we had an error. Not sure why. What happened here? I'm going to click open my system console, which this is available if you're on Windows or Linux. See, type error, string property argument 4 must be string, not a bool. Something to do with the preferences because we were in the preferences. Okay, this is what I did. You know what I did? I just copied this over and I had it set to default be false, but a string cannot be false. It can only be words. So we could either remove this and not give it a default, or we could change its default value to another thing string. Make sure a comma's there, right click, run script, and it's good to go. We'll clear that out and close that up. So now if we go to edit, preferences, we have this bool property here, and we have this string property, which we could save to our file for some reason if we needed our code to remember this when Blender gets turned off and turned on. Going back to this area up here for update functions, in this first bool property that we have set up, one of its attributes is to update, and then it can update a function. So we have created a function which we gave the same name as the property itself and then just put update on it. We could change this to whatever we wanted. So this could be anything, but I find it's a pretty useful convention to give your update function of whatever you have going on, unless you have a specific reason to call it something else, to just name it the property and then add update. And then so that's the name of this function. And so whenever someone changes a value of here, this is confusing. I'm going to change the name back to my bool prop. Let's see, run script. Whenever someone changes this, it will cause the code in here to run, which right now all it's doing is printing this. So we open this up, and then I click here. Notice this runs, or if I turn it off, it runs. So it runs whether it's turned on or off. Now you could set this up to only run when the thing was activated or deactivated. So I could say if self dot, and then my bool prop is the name of the actual property, bool prop, so we have a name, which is a value for displaying to humans, but it's the way it's referenced in the code is right here. So my bool prop. So if self.myBoolProp print I am on, and then else print I am off. Right click, run script. We'll clear the console to make things easier. Click this, I am on. Click this, I am off. All right, I'm going to go ahead and clear that out and close it down. If you're interested in more properties you can use, you can always just type in bpy.props, and then all the different properties you can use to do things will show up. And you can press enter, and then this will tell you what it does and the different parameters you can use. So for instance, we have options. There's different options you can add to these properties, such as making them animatable. So making it animatable would be like, if this bool property were animatable, then I could turn it on and then move the timeline down and then add a keyframe and like turn it off and then add keyframes to it basically. And so if you're interested in what all the different options are, just right click, and under reference, properties, options, there is a quick little cheat sheet for property options for different things you can do, such as text edit update. This is useful in string properties when you want every time a user types a letter for something, for it to be able for some code to run, for that update function to run. Here we have the draw function, which actually draws the buttons and layout stuff to the screen. Once again, the only reason why this draw function is meaningful to Blender inside this class is because this add-on preferences is subclassed, and it's basically just wearing this nobody Python class as a jacket. But this allows us to draw the contents into the preferences of our add-on, but this will edit whatever we've got in our preferences. So I could Control C, copy these. If I wanted to like display the same things over and over, I could add like a label, layout dot label, text equals fresh fish. And then right click, run script, edit, preferences, and oh, look how fancy our add-on preferences has gotten. Lots of different strings and buttons to press, which if I press one of these, they'll all turn on because it's all the same property. Anyway, one quick note about properties before we leave, because I would feel bad if I didn't make sure you understood this. If you do add an option, such as making something animatable, you have to enclose it in curly brackets like this. And then for each option you want to add, you add the thing. So animatable, did I spell it right? Probably not. Oh, what is this? Okay, yeah. And then you could, add more things, etc. if you wanted, and that's how you would add those. So just making sure you're clear on that, because that kind of stuff can be confusing, because a lot of stuff you just enter as a string or a different variable type. Anyway, so moving on. In our more advanced template, our code is spread across multiple files within our add-on, but in this basic one, everything is just included in the init file. For operators here, we have another nobody, everyday Joe Python class, which is made to be a very special boy thanks to what it's subclassing, which is bpy.types.operator. So real quick, if you're unfamiliar, I want to show you what it takes to create a class in Python. So not an operator specifically, but just a class. Here's a class. Class fish monster. And then colon. And then it's got to have something in here. We could just say pass, and that just means do nothing, but don't mess up the code. Or we could say print, I am a fish monster. And that's a class. So that's all this is. This title is not important at all. This is just a way, more or less, for us to be able to register this class down at the bottom of the script. What makes this a thing is what it's subclassing, the operator here. That's what gives these BL ID name, BL label, BL description, BL options meaning, is that they have meaning within this here. So this is just a basic operator. And so an example of a basic operator that comes with Blender, I think probably one of the most commonly used things is like bpy.ops.mesh.primitive cube add. And so if you notice that all this stuff just appeared magically as I typed, that's because this option is active in the Python console editor, which is a hacker feature which causes the editor to fill in as you type. But anyway, if we were to run this operator by just pressing enter, notice that it creates a cube. So an operator is pretty much how anything moves on your screen. Like, it's how anything does anything in Blender is processed through an operator. And we have a constant readout of that in Blender's info editor, which in the hacker workspace, the Python console and info editor, these are two editor types, are merged into a singular thing with singular function. So we just press this button. When we want to access the info editor, we can press the quick expand button to get a better view of that. And Blender has recently, in the last few versions, made this thing look awesome. I love these little icons. I love the way this reads out. It's so beautiful. Really love how this looks. But anyway, this gives you a readout of all the stuff you've been doing. And so if you want to add one of these operators to your code, you just, click it. You can either use the insert button, or you can press Control C. And I'll press this to move us back down to where we were. and then you would paste this, say, in the execute function of your operator. So here's where all the magic happens in an operator. It's all the code gets run. Whenever this gets called, the BL ID name, which this is typically how buttons and things reference this whole guy, is with this. So it calls this and then it just does everything in here in a row. And so that's how you would do that. Now this gets a little squirrely when it comes to the way these parameters are filled out. So a parameter is like a different thing that you can do inside of an operator or a class or a function. But in this case, we're talking about operators. So this is information on what specifically happened. So a lot of times you don't want the exact specifics, or you want the specifics to be dynamic based on other stuff the user is doing or the design of your add-on, or your operator. But just so you're aware of that, does a lot of stuff. Let's see, so Hacker commandeers the default right click in the text editor because it's got a lot of cool stuff to do and make available. But you can access the default right click menu here and edit text. And I thought there was a select the whole line button, but there's not. You can also access the default text editor menu items up here in this little hamburger thingamajo. And so, oh yeah, there we go. Shift Control A would have been the hotkey for that. Okay, so one other quick thing about the info editor here. So number one, we can clear it if we want by pressing that button. Number two, when I say that an operator is used for everything, I mean it's literally used for almost everything. And because of this reason, Blender does not show the operator used for every single thing you do, like clicking on something. It does for G for grab for transform.translate, but like box selecting, stuff like that. There's operators that fire when you even just scroll your mouse up and down to move the screen. Like, we're so used to everything being done for us and not having to program anything ourselves because this isn't 1987, that we take for granted that code is responsible for everything moving on the screen. So by default, the info editor doesn't display as much information as it's capable of. But if you click the quick debug menu, this gives a list of debug information and information you can expand that shows up both in the info editor as well as the system console. One such thing we can enable is debug WM, which stands for window manager. And now whenever I even scroll my mouse wheel, I'm just scrolling my mouse and it's showing the operator that was fired to do the thing, and just like moving the scroll bar causes this to happen. I just clicked and it said select, whereas normally we wouldn't get a readout for that. See, I'm clicking things, nothing's happening. But be forewarned, having this option active, which we just did, will also spam to the system console. So this system console is your computer situation, and the Python console is just this editor here. So it'll also spam to the system console as well as the info editor. So just be aware of that when you see a bunch of junk start coming up here. See, it's already spamming to it. Let's turn that off and let's clear all this stuff. So this is a clear all, basically, this button here. It doesn't clear your entire Python console editor. It only clears the current line, because I find typically that's what you want in the console. Yeah, the Python console editor. If you want to clear the entire thing, you just use the default thingamo there that Blender offers. Okay, let's close this up and continue going down here. Okay, so in the actual execute of our basic little operator here, we have a variable set to a string. And this is set up here so that it can be populated with stuff depending on what the user presses. And then it can be printed using this little piece of code, self.reportinfo message, which you can enter by right-clicking code insert, because we want to insert a piece of code. Operator, message, and alert info. Of course, these code inserts can all be edited and you can add as many as you want. It's extremely easy to do, but we'll save that for another video. But just letting you know, stuff like that is in there for like when you want to make your operator talk. Like so. This will send a message up into the top bar. All right, so what's going on here? So we have this property which is attached to our operator by just putting it up here. And as we discussed, you can add as many of these as you want. You can also right-click, code insert, slash properties and then pick from the various things. So an enum property is very involved. And also this includes the import for making it look like that. We can also disable including imports and comments and stuff in our code inserts, just so you're aware of that. So if you wanted to disable the import information and the extra comments in your code inserts, you can right click, options, and under templates, turn strip code inserts on, which removes extra information. So the whole point of the code inserts is to have an extremely human, understandable, quick system where you don't have to click anything. It just automatically you follow the tree of logic of what you want. But sometimes you want to have like extra notes and the imports required to make the thing work in there for when you forget little things about it. But most of the time you usually want that strip code inserts on, so you just get the very small piece of code to fill in the genetic structure of your add-on. Okay, so moving down, we have this option here, and which is just a property, and we reference it using self. So if self.option equals make torus, then run this Blender operator, which is a primitive torus add, and then change the message so when it prints out, it says this. And then we have an elif statement, which says if the user instead picked the one that said make sphere, then make a sphere. We only have two options here, so it's not that big a deal if this were to just say else. But imagine I had like 50 different possible scenarios, and I didn't want Python reading everything else below as soon as it decided, okay, this is the one that matches. We don't have to worry about anything else below here. So it's basically telling Python, if this is found or this is correct or whatever, then do this and do not read anything else below where it says elif. And so that's just a way to make your code go the tiniest bit faster. So that's what we use elif for. Okay, so right now we have this code being forked here, so only one of these two sets of things will happen. But we could add any operator in here we wanted to make whatever happen we wanted when smooth torus is pressed. So to quickly find out what available operators you can use, you can just type in ops dot, and this will show you everything that's available to you from within Blender. What's great about the IntelliSense powered autofill from Hacker, whenever you press dot to access something within an object or a class or whatever, you can just click from thing to thing to thing. So say I wanted to check out mesh, and then I wanted to see what are all the different mesh operators, dissolve limited, and then I can just click from thing to thing to thing. This is awesome. That is extremely good feeling to be able to do. You can read all of its parameters, so you know what you want, and then get a readout of whatever documentation whoever wrote the thing left in the code. So sometimes that's a lot of information, sometimes it's not very much, but Hacker will pull whatever they left there for you. So finally here we have two operators being run to finish up our code. So this is stuff we want to happen to whatever happens here or here. So we don't have this, inside here and also inside here. That would be waste. So we just have it outside of here. So this adds a subsurface modifier, which is the same as coming here and adding this. So one way you maybe could figure that out on your own is if you had the info editor displayed and you went here and you add subdivision surface, you can see this. You could click on that, Control C, and literally just pop it in there, or you could press insert. Now, whenever you insert things using this button, make sure that the cursor doesn't have something selected, or else it will be overwritten like this, which we don't want. Okay, so that's a very simple operator setup here. So moving down the line, we have the layout section, and this is meant for where you want basically panels or things in the headers or stuff like that. Once again, we have a nothing nobody class with a name that's just basically there to help us easily identify what this is. And it is subclassing the panel. So this gives it access to these parameters that Blender is very interested in when creating a panel, as well as the draw function. Okay, so here we have BL space type equals view 3D. So the space type is referring to basically the editor type. Like what editor type should this show up in? So an editor is just any one of Blender's editors. That's what it means when it says space type. So we can do view 3D. And if you're wanting to know like what are the other space types I can add or change this to, you can right click, reference, panel, BL, region type, or space type. So here are the different space types, which you could just click and copy these directly, paste over. And then there's region types as well. So the region type is referring to, okay, what part of that editor is the thing going to go in? Is it going to go in the UI shelf or the tool shelf or whatever? Is it going to go in the header, etc.? So there's different places. So this is what's called the UI shelf here in the 3D view. So we're telling it that. Below here it says BL category equals Modeler Pro. This will cause your panel to show up in, we could put it in view, tool, item, whatever. It'll look for, does this thing exist? So for instance, if we were to change this to view and then right click, run script, it'll look for, does this thing exist? And then it will add it to the existing tab if it already exists. So here's our Modeler Pro added to view. If it doesn't exist, it will create its own tab. So that's what we want. So we'll right click and put that back. And then label is just the label of the panel that's being added. And notice we have a little comment here. It says remove hash below to hide the panel header. And so if we were to do that and add this option here, we could right click, run script, and there would be no header if for some reason we wanted that to be the case. And it also appears that doing that causes this to jump to the top of the menu, which that's an interesting side effect. But let's go ahead and put that back there. So right click, run script. Okay, moving down to the real star of the show, and that is the draw function, which all this stuff here is what's causing all this stuff to be here. So we have layout equals self.layout. Self is always referring to the class, which typically your interest in that is you want to reference some other function that's added to the class. So listen, functions are not holy creatures that only Blender adds to its classes, such as draw. You can add a function to your own class and it's fine. And you can call upon it. So my own function, and then just include self and context. Then we could make it say something. I am not a holy creature. Use me to organize. Rather than writing a really long string out here, so in case you didn't know, you can concatenate strings by just entering a new line and adding another string. I am not a holy creature. Use me to organize your code. No exclamation mark. No need for that. And then close that off. And then so we would call upon this if we wanted to do something within our code. And this could also include some thing regarding layout. Occasionally if you've got a really complicated panel going down a bunch of stuff, you're going to want to be able to organize this stuff in a way where it can be referenced and re-referenced in different portions of the script. But to reference that, we would just use self. We would say self dot my own function. And here we don't have to include context. We don't have to include self because it's already self. You would just include context. In fact, you don't have to pass context at all. The reason why context is passed through so many things in Blender classes and functions is because you don't have to constantly be doing this, like with stuff. That's why you pass it. So we wouldn't have to technically pass this. We could just do this. But typically you don't want to have to, every single one of your functions do, this here. So we like to pass context. Because this is a panel, this would probably, rather than having some printing some snarky thing to the system console, we could have more stuff about layout. You could also pass layout and maybe with that, so layout. And of course, since I have context here, we'd have to have it here. Context, layout. And then you don't have to do layout equals self.layout. You can just go layout.operator or label or whatever to continue your layout of stuff. But anyway, that's another aside, one of my wonderful asides. Let's get rid of that. row here is why these two operators are displayed side by side, and the parameter align set to true is why they are touching each other. If we were to remove that, right click, run script, they are no longer touching, but we'll put that back. And right here we've got a little note. These templates are full of little notes to help you remember how to do stuff. It says you can right click and then press find icon to copy and paste and change icons, which is this parameter here within the row.operator display. So to access that, you right click and you can press find icon. Now this is a very quick and dirty little icon finder. Blender actually ships with an add-on which has a much more detailed icon situation. This displays all icons except for toolbar and brush icons, which are kind of a different beast and have to be used in a different way than when you set an icon parameter in your typical layout thing. But besides those, it's everything, and you can just click on something and it will quickly copy it and tell you what it is up in the top bar there. So say we wanted to change these icons to ghosts. We could then press Control V once we've selected that, and I could get the other ghost, and I already have that selected. Control V, right click, run script, and now we've got some cute ghosts. Now unfortunately this won't also make ghosts show up when we press the buttons. That would be really sweet, but that's it's for another day. Okay, so something else I should point out here. Notice that we have this dot option equals and then a thing. So this option is a string property attached to our operator class here, as we were talking about. And so this is how we feed information to the properties of the operators so that it can do different tasks. So here we have it set to make torus, and here we have it set to make sphere. Now occasionally, some built-in Blender operators, well usually most Blender operators have a lot more properties than just one. Like they'll have, sometimes a bunch of different properties. And sometimes you want to be able to pass more than one piece of information to the operator so it knows how to do stuff or which thing you want to be done with that particular call of the operator. And so to do that, you would have to remove the dot property there, and you need to instead create some variable name. It could be anything, but op is easy to remember, so you could just say op equals. And then from op, then you can set whatever properties of the thing. So option equals, I don't even remember what we had it set to. What were the options? So torus, and it's make torus. Easy enough. And then make sphere also. So we can do the same thing down here. Now I only have one property set up for that operator, but if we had a bunch of different stuff we wanted to pass to it, like other options and other things to happen, we could do that through the layout in that way. So it's important to know that. So you could have something else here equals, and it could be something, say an integer or a float number or whatever. So I'll just leave that like that because it'll work the same, or should anyway. Right click, run script, and yep, still working. Okay, so here we have col equals layout.column. So this is the exact same thing as with the row, only vertically. Now, did I really even need to use this? No, not particularly with this setup here, because layout and then layout dot menu, layout dot separator would have basically worked the same. This is here in case you wanted to just quickly expand this area of code and be able to make things that connect, like a column of stuff that connects, so it's easier to set that up. Here we call a menu that we create down here. Very simple menu in our menu section, and that's what allows this to pop up here. Then we have separator, which adds space. So I added 2 separators instead of 1 because I wanted just a little bit more space between there. All right, so moving down, we have, it says I'll also access this via add-on preferences. And so this is where we make it to where you can adjust a preference saved with the add-on itself in the layout. And so we have addons equals context.preferences.addon. So what this will do is it accesses all the currently user-enabled add-ons. So for instance, if I were to just type this out, this will show all the currently user-enabled add-ons, which right now is just Cycles, which is on by default in Blender, all this other stuff, and Modeler Pro. So it's asking if this is in add-ons, then go ahead and also draw these properties which come from the add-ons user preferences. Of course, these add-on preferences won't exist unless the add-on is actually enabled via Blender's preferences. So even though we run the script earlier when we didn't have it enabled, as far as Blender is concerned, this won't mean anything. So this will cause an error, which is why this is included in the script. So it won't draw this stuff. It won't run this bit of code unless the user has enabled the add-on. So the purpose of that is to make it to where if you create a new add-on from one of these templates, you can immediately press run script without having to activate it and still be able to mess around with it or test different pieces of code and what have you. All right, moving down, we have the menu section with a little note here telling you that in the BLID name, which BLID names of menus have to be presented this way with the MT in the title. So it's a little note about that. And so basically we have another just random Python class, which is made important by the BPY item that it's subclassing, which is menu. And we got its label, its ID name, and then we just draw out the menu contents, which is what happens inside of here. And then finally we have registration, which this is where we place all of our classes to be registered when the script is run. So whenever you add a new operator or class or something, and you want it to be registered, you have to copy the title of the class like this, just double click it, Control C, come down here and paste it into the classes. Make sure you include a comma and make sure the spacing isn't weird and lined up with everything else. That's already in there, it's there, so we don't need to put it. But that's pretty much what's going on there. Here we have our actual register and unregister functions, and these get called whenever the script is run at startup time, if the script is actually an add-on and saved within the add-ons. This key maps here, we're storing a Python list, a blank empty new list, because whenever this add-on is registered and unregistered, we want to be able to store the key maps we add so that when the unregister function is called, it can go through and remove all of the keys we added should the user deactivate the add-on. So within the register, we have a little for loop that just goes through each one of these classes and registers it. There's a built-in Blender thing for doing this, the same as this for loop, but I've experienced issues with it from time to time because it's supposed to unregister and register the classes, so I don't typically use it. It's called like bpy.utils.factory, or no, what is it? Register factory? A register class factory, that's it. And so utility function integrate register and unregister functions, but I've experienced issues with that, or I either need to customize the way some things are registered or whatever. So typically I just use this. Then we add the actual key maps. When you add a key map, basically you have to do a thing to define where that key map is going. Is it going to be in the 3D view? Is it going to be in the image editor, etc.? To set up a space type, which we discussed basically is referring to different editors when you see space type in code. Of course, you can access in the references under panel BL space type. There's all the space types. You want to change where the hotkey goes. And you can, if you're trying to figure out what the exact name is, like this, you can look that up in the key maps of the preferences. There's the titles of stuff that you could use there. And then we append this key map, which is something that's added to the window manager here. And then we can add as many hotkeys for this space type as we want under here. We just do KMI equals blah, blah, blah. And there's a little information about how to do that. And so this is what causes the menu operator to fire whenever we press Control-Shift-Q here in the 3D view. And it says we can set properties for the key map item we just created. So wm.callMenu is a default Blender operator. As you can see here, call menu. So we use that whenever we want to press a button to then access a menu that we created, which like is this menu we put here. And then so you can access the property of any operator, much in the same way we talked about accessing those properties when we put it in layouts by doing KMI.properties. And then so KMI, this we could call this whatever. That's just a random variable name to store this thing. But the properties has to be properties, has to say properties. And then a property of WM call menu is the name of the menu. And then you can put whatever menu you created for if you want a hotkey to make a menu come up. Then we have unregister. And like I said, this gets called when you enable, disable an add-on. Then down here we have if name equals main. So name is referring to the actual file name of the file. So if we type print and then name here, and I open up my system console, right click, run script, we'll see that the name is indeed main. And then so it knows to register. Basically what this is saying, why this is here is so that when you're testing scripts in the text editor, these register functions will get called, and thus the classes will get called and thus rewritten and re-registered, so the changes you've made will show up within Blender. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close that out. So this is pretty much the basic add-on. When you're done editing and creating and doing a bunch of cool stuff, you can export your add-on so that it can be shared and uploaded installed by other people by clicking on the navigator button. And then add-ons, and here's our Modeler Pro. We press this to export it, brings up a window. It brings up a Mace window. And then you can just select the location where you want the add-on to be exported. You don't have to actually enter in a name or anything like that. Just select the location, browse to wherever. And you can just pick desktop, click export add-on. And now if we head over to the desktop, there is our add-on. So you can create, edit, and export an add-on all from the navigator menu of the text editor when you have the Hacker add-on, and you're good to go. So Hacker has a lot more features. As you can see, there's lots of stuff we didn't even talk about, and all kinds of buttons and cool things. But there's lots more information in this video playlist and at blendersensei.com/hacker, where you can get Hacker. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I know it was rather lengthy, but maybe you learned something, or maybe I helped whet your appetite a little bit for coding in Blender. So if so, that's great. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.